To the memory of the local cinema, the bioscopes, biographs, Rexes, Roxys and Rialtos, and all who worked in them. The ushers, usherettes, cashiers, projectionists.
To the smell of oily floor, perfume disinfectant, and human perspiration. To reels projected in the wrong order, the scratches and the breaks.
And to the full supporting program, this film is affectionately dedicated.
It must have been when I was around 7 years old. I saw my first Laurel and Hardy film. And then after that, every Saturday when the Laurel and Hardy movies came to town, I watched all of them, all day Saturday and into the evening, until my mother and father came and got me out.
My treat was to go to the news theatre. And always the news theatre was full of all the things that either delight or bore a little boy. So you sat through Mussolini and Countess of something, hitting a champagne bottle against a HMS. And then suddenly, in the darkness, you would hear...
That beats the hell out of the high and the mighty.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we present for your entertainment and approval Laurel and Hardy in their latest comedy entitled Thank you.
What a beautiful morning. Turn on the radio and let's have some music.
I must have been 5 years old, I guess. And I immediately knew that they were my friends.
The reasons why you love them, you cannot define when you are a child. You just love them because they are part of yourself, and they have this poetical appeal which was so great, and they made us laugh. But it's not so much that I laughed. I was sharing their dream.
They did create a world all their own and asked you to accept it. There was something almost Christian about their faith and the love and the trust that they had. They really lived life the way it's supposed to be lived, and showed us all that it doesn't work.
Another nice mess you've gotten me into.
Well, I couldn't help it. It's only
Let's get together. Let's concentrate and use our brains. Rome wasn't built in a day. Remember the old adage? A task slowly done is surely done.
To me, it was the greatest love story of all time. I think that was the basis for their longevity in films, was that they obviously loved each other and cared about each other very, very much.
Now let's get this place cleaned up.
Today, we invite you to celebrate a friendship of two different people from different parts of the world who've met and have stayed together for 29 years, for the rest of their lives.
They've made film comedies, short and long, good and bad. Over 100 of them. They didn't have much time to think about them. They did them and enjoyed themselves. And we enjoyed ourselves too. But they were just a supporting program.
And yet, almost 40 years later, their films seem to mean more and more. Could it be their friendship is immortal? To Stan Laurel, comedy was something fundamental to life, and he was the guiding spirit behind the best of their work. He spent his older years in a modest flat in Santa Monica, which became a place of pilgrimage for fans, devotees, and fellow comedians, asking for his views about the art and craft of humor.
He certainly had no idea that the comedies themselves were meaningful in any general philosophic sense. In fact, he was repelled by that kind of thinking. To him, comedy was something that you did. You learned how to do it, you did it, and you were very pleased that you did it, and you were pleased that the audience was pleased.
Stan Laurel was a real clown. He had a great sense for being the real fool in the Shakespeare sense. And there is much pathos in him. And when you sense the man, you could feel that behind the funny Stan was a philosopher, a man who had deep thoughts about life and theater.
We go through this lifetime but once, and if we were ever to meet a genius, we wouldn't know it. And in the case of Stan Laurel, I knew it, and I indeed met a genius. And a genius in life. He was a magnificent human being, and he played the role of living here better than anyone I've ever known. He breathed better. He was grateful for the fact that the lungs would suck air in and take it out. He appreciated that there were holes in his nostrils that would assist him in maintaining life. I've never met anyone like that. And when I talk of him, whether there's a camera there or not, I find myself trembling all the time. I really miss him, and I miss what I've learned, and very selfishly, I feel deprived. I would have liked for him to be here a longer time. He was one that I think they should have arranged to have lived forever. They should have worked that out somehow.
In the small town of Ulverston in northwest England, the house still stands where Arthur Stanley Jefferson was born on June 16, 1895.
Neck. Smile.
His father was a well-known figure in the north of England, a lessee of a great many provincial theatres, also a playwright, producer and actor. Stan was never very good at school. He was brought up in the atmosphere of provincial theatre.
He loved the kind of a feeling of music and a kind of a bump-de-bump sort of atmosphere in all of his work. He thought of himself basically as a music hall comedian. And from his very earliest days, when he used to go to his dad's theaters and look at the greatest comedians in the halls, that was what he always wanted to do, and that's what he did for the rest of his life.
What are you going to do with that egg?
I'll bet you, Dolly, you can't put it in your mouth without breaking it.
Go on, take him on. You remember when you done it with a billiard ball?
That's a cinch. Get your buck ready.
At the age of 16, Stan made his first stage appearance in a short act at a small music hall in Glasgow. Unknown to him, his father was in the audience watching and congratulated him afterwards. More than 20 years later, at the height of his popularity, Stan at last admitted that the act was awful, just bloody awful. At the age of 17, Stan joined the troupe of Fred Carno, the legendary producer, a splendid school for the talents of Chaplin and Stan Laurel to develop in the field of pantomime and the music hall.
Stan brought the music hall performer from the proscenium and put it into a 35mm standard aperture frame. All he did was take the proscenium and bring it down into that, which would ultimately be exploded onto a screen equally the size of the proscenium.
It is a music hall type of comedy where they take a gag or routine and rework it, polish it from film to film as it goes along.
When in the early 1950s they returned to the music hall stage in England, it was still the same old magic. Those who saw them speak about two elderly gentlemen in supreme control of their medium, strolling onto the stage, relaxed, with all the time in the world and toying with the audience.
Once I watched Stan in the later years backstage, I think at the Hippodrome in Birmingham, just before he was going on. And like any performer, there's a nervousness, a certain tension. But the minute that he got his cue, and it was, as I recall, it was a part of the Cuckoo song, the Dance of the Cuckoos, their theme song. There was a particular beat that he started on. And just before that started, there was a beautiful warmth that came to his face as he then walked out. And then when I watched him as he came back out, and there was such a feeling of completion. It was what he was born to do, and it was deeply, deeply moving.
In September 1910, Fred Carno's troupe, with Chaplin and Stan Laurel among them, went to appear in the United States. A night in an English music hall came to Broadway and traveled all across the land.
We're going to go, we're going to go, we're going to go way down in Dixie, where the hens are doggone glad to lay scrambled eggs in the newborn hay. We're going to see, we're going to see.
Oliver Hardy was born in Harlem, Georgia, on the 18th of January, 1892.
Smile.
He ran a hotel. His father was of English stock. He could trace his ancestors back as far as the same Hardy from whom the dying Admiral Nelson had asked for a kiss.
His father's first name was Oliver Hardy, and his mother's maiden name was Norval. So he was named Norval Hardy. But he took the name because he was proud of his, he always said, well, it sounded more impressive, Oliver Norval Hardy.
Good evening. The name, please. Oliver Norval Hardy. I'd like to see the future Mrs. Hardy.
Come in.
Thank you.
What's your name? Stanley Laurel. Say sir when you're addressing me. Now what's your name?
Sir Stanley Laurel.